Today we're going to look at 3 of the best win-win trades from the last 10 years of MLB trade deadlines, and it's kind of interesting to think about it because this is what every trade aims to be. A swapping of players where both sides benefit from the deal made. And yet I feel like this is the most rare kind of trade in baseball. Let's not waste any time and get into our first entry. For this first trade, the exchange of wins above replacement isn't exactly equal, but I think both of these teams are happy with where they ended up. Back in the summer of 2022, the Philadelphia Phillies were beginning their ascent to becoming one of the more dominant franchises in the National League. After a 22-29 start led to the firing of Joe Girardi and Ken Rosenthal's claim that this wouldn't fix the Phillies, the team caught fire in early June, winning 14 of 16 games to open that month. By the end of July, the team found themselves 8 games above 500, trailing decently in the division but in firm position for an NL wildcard spot. In a great space to buy at the deadline, the team looked to replace longtime center fielder Odubel Herrera, who not only was continuously underperforming, but also just had far too shitty vibes to be on the most likable team in baseball. They found a suitor in the Los Angeles Angels, a team who they would actually trade with twice on deadline day, sending away their former #1 overall draft pick Mickey Moniak in exchange for pitching relief in Noah Syndergaard. After an impressive start to the season that saw them 11 games over 500 in first place of the AL West division, the wheels completely fell off on the Angels season when a 14-game losing streak derailed any hopes of a playoff berth. And if you ever wondered what the psychological effect of losing 14 baseball games in a row would take on you, just look at this picture of Joe Madden. In a 1-for-1 swap, the Angels sent away their struggling center fielder Brandon Marsh, who had also crept up on the top 50 overall prospects in all of baseball prior to the 2021 season. For Marsh, the defense was always there, but over a full season's worth of games in Anaheim, the offensive production was lacking. Granted, I'm still a bit surprised the Angels decided to cut bait so soon, considering Marsh was only 24 years old at the time. But then again, the team already housed outfield talents like Mike Trout and Taylor Ward, with the expectation that Joe Adell would join them sooner rather than later. The Phillies had actually tried multiple times to acquire Marsh in the prior offseason, also making calls for Jose Siri of the Astros and Alek Thomas of the Diamondbacks, but they were unable to get a trade done. Marsh and the 6 years of control left on his contract were sent away to the contending Phillies in exchange for their number 5 prospect, catcher Logan O'Hoppe. His story was fairly remarkable, being a former 23rd round draft pick from 4 years prior, whose hitting numbers actually improved drastically when the minor league season was lost to the pandemic in 2020. He won the starting catcher gig out of spring training in 2023 and got off to a surging start before a torn labrum stopped his breakout. However, this season he's on track to play a full schedule and his bat continues to impress. Though his defense is still a work in progress and is steadily improving, his offensive output is hard to ignore, with an OPS plus over 10% better than league average in well over 100 games. Over the past 2 years, his slugging clip ranks 4th among all major league catchers with at least 400 plate appearances in this 2-year window. This, however, was a piece that the Phillies could logically part with considering the contract that they signed JT Realmuto to a year prior. Welcoming in Brandon Marsh was a godsend for the Phillies' ailing defense. Upon his arrival in the red pinstripes, his bat began to come around as well. He certainly profiles as a platoon-type player with some ugly splits against left-handed pitching, and his strikeouts still remain a persistent issue, with a top 5 highest percentage in the National League this year. But outside of those two things, he was exactly the missing piece that was needed for this Phillies lineup. He's played over 200 games with Philadelphia with an OPS plus nearly 20% better than league average, and in both 2022 and 2023, he ranked in the 90th percentile or better for outs above average as both a left fielder and center fielder. Last season, his 372 on-base clip was 5th best among all National League outfielders. Right now, the B-War exchange definitely tips in favor of Brandon Marsh, but he does also have about 100 more games played for his new team compared to Logan O'Hoppe. Going forward, I think both teams will be very satisfied with how this swap turned out. This next trade may not be one that you consider win-win exactly, which is why I think it's one of the more interesting swaps we'll cover in these past few weeks. Back in 2018, the Arizona Diamondbacks were fresh off a 93-win season the year prior, looking to return to October play in need of some offensive ammunition. They were having a King Decade type rollercoaster season, an 18-7 record in April, an 8-19 record in the month of May, and then a 19-9 record in the month of June. Arizona was in desperate need of any sort of stability, fighting tooth and nail to keep pace with the Los Angeles Dodgers. To that point, despite their impressive record, their team weighted runs created plus of 88 was 12% below league average and second last in the National League, 26th overall in baseball. The roster was held afloat by a sturdy, dominant rotation of Zach Greinke, Patrick Corbin, Robbie Ray, and Does that say Clay Buchholz? With an ERA of 2 and 16 starts? I spent a lot of time on Baseball Reference, but I feel like I learned something new every day. Their answer to their offensive woes came from the Minnesota Twins. They were in the opposite scenario with a lineup full of consistent bats, but zero consistency from their pitching staff. The team never recovered from an 8-14 record in April, playing 500 ball most of the way after the first month. The franchise conducted a massive sell-off at that year's deadline, sending Ryan Presley to the Astros, Lance Lynn to the Yankees, Brian Dozier to the Dodgers, and most notably for our video here, Eduardo Escobar to the Arizona Diamondbacks. In the swap, Arizona sent away unranked outfield prospect Ernie de la Trinidad, as well as number 10 overall prospect in their system, outfielder Gabriel Maciel. The last piece of this trade is the only player who is currently on the roster for the Twins this year, the number 16 overall prospect in the Diamondbacks system, right-handed pitcher Yohan Duran. He had posted mostly underwhelming numbers in the minor leagues as a starting pitcher, but in 2022, Minnesota called him up to the big leagues to be a part of their bullpen. Duran took the league by storm, posting a sparkling 1.86 ERA in 57 appearances as a rookie, the 9th best mark in all of baseball for relievers with at least 60 innings pitched that year. He hasn't slowed up a bit since that rookie campaign, staking his claim as one of the most dominant relief pitchers in baseball. He features one of the most electric fastballs in the game, ranking in the 100th percentile every year of his career for fastball velocity, and that makes his curveball all the more devastating. From 2022 to 2023, his 2.15 ERA is bested only by Evan Phillips, Brian Abreu, and Felix Bautista. Though he's looked a bit more human so far this year, he's become an integral part of Minnesota's winning formula, stabilizing a once chaotic bullpen. So by that description, it seems like the Twins won this trade, right? Well, no, not exactly. Arizona received Eduardo Escobar in the swap, who at the time was tearing the cover off the baseball to the tune of an .852 OPS in nearly 100 games with Minnesota that season. When he arrived in the desert, his numbers returned to around league average, and Arizona would go on to miss the playoffs with an 82-win season, cursed by a September collapse that no one ever really talks about. To be a fan of a team where nobody talks about that September collapse, I can only dream.
Boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
In the offseason, they inked Escobar to a team-friendly 3-year extension after he enjoyed his time in Arizona. In 2019, Escobar would have the best season of his career, clubbing a career-best 35 home runs and making his contract look like an absolute steal. He also collected a career-high 118 RBIs, which ranked 4th in the National League for the season, tied with Nolan Arenado. The 2019 Arizona team gets forgotten because they too missed the playoffs, but it was through no fault of Escobar. Escobar would play 2 more seasons for Arizona, making an All-Star game in 2021 before getting traded once more to Milwaukee. In his parts of 4 seasons for Arizona, he was a cornerstone at third base, racking up nearly 6 wins above replacement in his time out west. This value does outweigh Duran's contribution to the Twins thus far, though I have to imagine he'll pass the total in the ensuing years. Though they failed to return to the postseason with Escobar and certainly could use someone like Duran in their bullpen these days, it's hard to argue against the motivation for the trade in the first place, being that Arizona was in a contention window in both 2018 and 2019.
Bottom of the 9th. 2 outs, bases full. The drama of baseball is real.
And so is the drama on the DraftKings Sportsbook, because right now you can use promo code OLIVE, bet $5, and win $150 in bonus bets instantly. From the first pitch to the final out, DraftKings has you covered with live betting, same-game parlays, odd boosts, and so much more. If you're a baseball fanatic like me, it's a great way to enhance your viewing experience of the game, even if you're watching your favorite team or a team you haven't watched in 20 years. So download their app now, use promo code OLIVE when you do, bet $5 of your own money, and win $150 in bonus bets instantly at the DraftKings Sportsbook. Thank you to them for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to the video. Now for our final trade in this video, will you guys allow me to indulge myself on this next entry? Can I be a Mets fan for a second, or will that just make you nauseous? You know, you're not saying anything, so I think you're okay with it. The 2015 Mets won the National League pennant, but for about half the regular season, these guys could not hit an absolute lick. At the time of that year's trade deadline, the Mets ranked dead last in all of baseball for runs scored and 28th in MLB with a team-weighted runs created plus of just 85, 15% worse than league average, but also somehow still 3rd best in their division, which is pretty hilarious. Still, a week out from the deadline, their talented pitching staff had kept them afloat, with them sitting 1 game over 500. It was clear that the team needed needed offensive reinforcements, and while the acquisitions of Kelly Johnson and Juan Uribe helped a little bit to ease the anemic lineup, it was clear that a far bigger splash would be necessary for this team to get over the hump. They almost made that move with a proposed trade for outfielder Carlos Gomez in exchange for pitcher Zach Wheeler and infielder Wilmer Flores, but after some tears were shed and some physicals were failed, that move fell through. It was all for the best though, as a far more lucrative option presented itself days later. In the past calendar year to that point, talented outfielder Yoenis Cespedes had already been traded twice. Oakland sent him away to Boston in a retooling move to acquire ace John Lester, and 4 months later, the Red Sox flipped him to Detroit in an offseason swap to bring in pitching help in Rick Porcello, who would become the sport's funniest Cy Young winner just a year later. Do you guys like pitcher wins?
No!
You love pitcher wins.
No!
In Detroit, Cespedes continued to mash the cover off the baseball, but the 2015 Detroit Tigers seemed to be a team going nowhere. A year after a 90-win season resulted in an ALDS sweep at the hands of the Baltimore Orioles, the team was stirring in mediocrity, sitting 3.5 games back of a wildcard spot in a very crowded American League playoff picture. Detroit definitely could have bought in on that roster and tried to compete for a wildcard spot, but they decided to seize an opportunity. They became sellers in a very favorable market, and with Cespedes headed towards free agency in the offseason, he became a prime trade option once again. The slugger caught fire once he donned the orange and blue, sparking the Mets offense with an OPS well over 900 and 17 home runs in a 57-game stretch. New York would go on to win the division, make a World Series appearance, and then subsequently sign Cespedes to a hefty contract in the offseason. His impact was so incredible that he finished 13th in National League MVP voting despite playing the first 102 games of the season in the opposite league. While his ensuing years were marred with unfortunate injuries, Cespedes mashed whenever he managed to stay on the field. He ranks 3rd all-time in Mets OPS plus leaders for hitters with over 1,000 plate appearances in their uniform, tied up with legendary Hall of Fame catcher Mike Piazza. His .539 slugging clip as a Met trails only Piazza on the all-time ranks, just slightly ahead of Pete Alonso. What's beautiful about this trade is that you could argue Michael Fulmer was even better on the other side of things, who was only the Mets' number 17 overall prospect according to MLB at the time of the swap. He claimed American League Rookie of the Year honors in 2016 with an impressive 3.06 ERA and 1.11 WHIP in 26 starts. His 3.45 ERA from 2016 to 2017 ranked 7th among all American League pitchers with at least 300 innings thrown cumulatively, ahead of the likes of CC Sabathia and David Price, to name a few. Even after undergoing Tommy John surgery in 2019, Fulmer made a triumphant return as an effective reliever. In 2021, he assumed the closer's role for Detroit, locking down 14 saves with a sub-3 ERA in his first season out of the bullpen. Overall, Fulmer has Cespedes beat in terms of playing time and total wins above replacement value, but the Tigers failed to supplement him with a talented roster. The Tigers' playoff drought is ongoing, and perhaps the Mets' own drought would have lasted a whole lot longer had they not gotten this deal done. Fulmer provided much stability to a routinely underperforming Detroit pitching staff, while Cespedes provided New York the star power that they desperately needed in the mid-2010s. And those were the 3 trades I picked out for this video. It was surprisingly hard to find a lot of win-win trades from past trade deadlines, so if I missed one and you can think of one, leave a comment down below and maybe we'll do a part 2. That'll do it for me, and I'll see you guys next time.